안녕하세요, 여러분의 한국어 선생님 고빌리입니다. Welcome to the fourth episode in this series where I analyze the Korean speaking of the group ATEEZ, an 8-member group that debuted in 2018. So far, I've shared my analysis of 3 members, Hongjung, Seonghwa, and Yoonho, and today we'll be looking at Kang Yeosang. But first, if you're new here, I'm a Korean teacher with 12 years of teaching experience and 20 years of learning the Korean language. So in this video, I'll break down the Korean speech of Yeosang, including any unique expressions that he uses and giving my professional analysis of him as a Korean teacher and speaker. But before that, I need to thank the sponsor of this video, my Patreon supporters and channel members. The reason that I don't have any sponsorships in these videos is because of you. And if you would like to help support my channel and to help me keep making more Korean language content, please consider becoming a Patreon member or channel member. And there are links to both of those in the description box. As a member, you'll also get access to bonus content like Korean cheat sheets, lesson outlines, and worksheets, and you'll get to help choose the next group that I analyze. Okay, so let's get into today's topic, which is of course Kang Yeosang.
노트 아무거나 틀어주세요.
여상이 랩한 거 처음 봐. 나도 처음 봐.
And I have to say something first. I was wrong about Yeosang. Before I started researching for this video, I spent a couple of days searching general information about ATEEZ, things like what to look out for, what videos people recommend watching. And I found several people mentioning how Yeosang was the quiet member, that he was shy and didn't really talk much. And from only looking at his behavior, you might get that impression. But as soon as I started listening to him speak, it was clear to me right away that I was wrong. And I have proof. So take a look at this clip where the members are having a debate. And Yeosang actually, not only does he speak a lot, but he manages to convince almost all of the other members immediately to join his side.
잠시만요. 이거는 봐봐요. 이거는 한눈을 판 거잖아요. 이죠? 이거는 바람이에요. 갔잖아요. 거기를 옆에 차은우 선배님이 지나간다? 한눈 팔 수 있어요. 이건 아니지. 이거는 간 거잖아. 이거는 갔잖아. 티켓을. 이거 봐봐. 에이티니를 다른 아이돌분과 3초 동안 인사시킬래요? 2시간 반 동안 같이 춤추는 거 구경시키고 노래하는 거 구경시키고.
Basically, the argument is, would you be more jealous to see an ATEEZ look at another idol for a few seconds? Or would you be more jealous if that ATEEZ actually attended another idol's concert? And at first, it's only Yeosang and Mingi who say that they'd be more jealous if the fan actually attended another idol's concert than if they just looked at another idol. But then Yeosang says, like, hey, if someone looks at another idol, all they've done is just looked. But if someone attends another idol's concert, then that's cheating. And then Yeosang ends up with that, quickly convincing 3 of the other members. And then he goes on, he says that if someone attends a 2-hour-long concert, they're obviously also going to be looking for more than a few seconds. And Yeosang doesn't show any shyness when he talks. And this clip was really long and Yeosang just talked a lot, so I had to trim it down. But you get the idea. He's not that quiet. But what is true is that Yeosang speaks very politely and softly, especially when compared to some of the other members. So I'll be talking about that in this video, as well as a few other things like his handwriting and what filler words he uses, and if he uses any dialect. So first of all, his dialect. Well, Yeosang was born in 1999 in the city of Pohang, which is in the southeast part of Korea in the Gyeongsang province. And I was also expecting that because he's from Pohang that he would speak Pohang dialect, which is mostly similar to other dialects in that area, such as Busan dialect. However, during elementary school, he actually moved to the city of Incheon, which is the 3rd largest city in South Korea and is located just west of Seoul. Now, Incheon does have a dialect. In fact, one of the most famous dialect expressions from Incheon is 쩐다, which is a slang expression that you can hear all over Korea. In fact, I think most people don't even know that it's from there. And it's from the dialect verb 쩔다, and it means like dang, and can have both a positive and a negative meaning. However, Incheon dialect is not as different from like regular Korean as perhaps a dialect from somewhere like Pohang, meaning that Yeosang doesn't really use any dialect. But that's okay because there's still plenty to talk about.
할까?
오케이.
나는 개미 할게.
Okay.
나는 물개.
This is a game where each person picks an animal and you have to do the motions for each animal. And the other members pick like toothless, a lizard, a rabbit, an anteater, and then Yeosang picks seal, 물개, meaning that anytime someone says seal, they have to do that same goofy motion. Anyway, before joining KQ Entertainment, he was actually a trainee at Big Hit Music, which is of course the same record label as both BTS and TXT. Until recently, he also was one of the hosts of the SBS music program The Show during its 6th season.
네, 오늘의 더쇼 초이스 후보를 소개해볼까요? 영상 플레이!
And I've had a lot of time to listen to Yeosang speak, so let's talk about my first impressions.
Hello, I'm Haliki. Nice to meet you. I love you. Thank you.
Besides being pretty hilarious, my first impression of Yeosang's speech was that he sounds very polite. And I think that this is the reason why I had read online that some people thought that he's quiet. His speaking is not only soft, but the words that he chooses are polite as well. And he's just a really polite guy in general. Here's a clip of him explaining that even if he were to fart in a room with strangers, he would just apologize instead of trying to blame someone else.
근데 저는 웬만하면 참는데
났어요. 세버렸어요.
그런 상황이 있으면 저는 막 너가 꼈잖아 막 이런 식으로 하진 않아요. 솔직하게 그냥 죄송합니다 이렇게 합니다.
And his voice tone contributes to his politeness too. Here's a short sentence and listen to how soft and smoothly he speaks.
그 솔직히 저도 아직 잘 모르겠어요.
Now, the softness, you can just hear. I don't need to explain that. But his intonation is the smoothest we've heard so far. And I've said this previously, but typically intonation in a Korean sentence works like this. You'll start the sentence by going up a bit at the very beginning, and then the very end of the sentence will go back down. The middle of the sentence will be mostly smooth or a little wavy, but it depends on the person. And while Yeosang does go up at the start and down at the end, the middle of his sentences are also smooth as well as the ends of his sentences. Instead of quickly going back down at the very end, like what most people will do, his sentences slowly drop down at the end. And here's another clip from this same episode, and listen to how he sounds when asking a question.
혹시 제 성격상 뭐 조심해야 될 거나 약간 조언 같은 게 혹시 있으실지.
He asks if there's anything about his personality that he should be cautious of, or if he has any advice for him. But not only is his intonation soft, as you can hear, but the way he asks it is also extremely polite. He says, 혹시 제 성격상 뭐 조심해야 될 거나 약간 조언 같은 게 혹시 있으실지. And he uses the word 혹시 here twice. And 혹시 means by chance. It's a word that you can add to a question to make it softer, like asking, by chance, do you know? But because he uses it twice, it makes his sentence, well, it makes his question really polite, like asking, by chance, might you know something by chance? And the sentence ending he uses here, 있으실지, isn't actually an ending. What it means is whether there is. It's half of a grammar form, and it usually will end with something like I'm curious or I'm wondering. So this means I'm wondering whether there is by chance. But by not finishing his sentence, it makes his sentence sound even more soft. Kind of like saying, perhaps anything by chance I should be cautious, or any advice by chance? And it sounds like a really open-ended question instead of just directly asking it. And it's not just in this situation, but Yeosang's voice and intonation is often just as smooth in other situations too. Here's another clip where Seonghwa is holding a picture of a sickle, and Yeosang comments that they look like San's eyebrows.
낫이라고 하죠.
저 데자뷰 산이 눈썹 모양인데?
맞네요. 틀렸어요, 저 때는.
맞죠?
Here, Yeosang is making a joke, and his voice gets more excited. So his intonation in the middle of his sentence now has a bit of a wave, but it's not that much compared to others, and his signature smooth tone is still there. And here's just one more clip from a live stream he did where he answered questions about himself. Now, I'm not going to draw the intonation for this clip because it's longer, but even if you don't understand what he's saying, just listen to his intonation, the ups and downs when he speaks. So here's the clip.
네, 그래서 오늘 라이브는 이제 여기에 준비된 이제 여상 PDR을 제가 한번 우리 AT님과 같이 의견을 좀 나누면서 작성을 해보면서 제 자신을 한번 다시 알아가보는 시간을 한번 가져보면 좋을 것 같아요.
And I think to really hammer down this point, I want to compare Yeosang's intonation to another member, Woo-young. So take a look at this completely average clip from Woo-young, and again, listen to his intonation, so how his tone goes up and down throughout his sentences.
형 방송 나가면 이제 형 팬사한테 와가지고 아 성아야 나 누구누구 아이돌 콘서트 갔다 왔어 너 그건 괜찮다 그래서 난 갔다 왔어 근데 2시간 반 동안 봤는데 너무 좋더라 하고 다 다음 팬도 너무 많은데 성아야 나도 같이 갔다 왔어 이러면 어쩔 거야 괜찮아?
I'm really looking forward to sharing my analysis of Woo-young, but anyway, now let's compare what we just saw to a different clip of Yeosang, where he's expressing how touched he was after receiving birthday messages from the other members.
진짜 너무 제가 원래 리액션이 되게 영혼이 없지만 진짜 좀 감동받았습니다.
He even says himself, but his reactions are usually, he says, 영혼이 없지만, meaning my reactions are normally soulless. So Yeosang is fully aware of how calm he acts most of the time, and that he doesn't often get loud or excited. And listen again to the very last thing that he says.
좀 감동받았습니다.
You might have noticed this, but it's common for him to slowly drop his intonation, not at the very end of his sentences, but the entire last part of his sentences, sometimes dropping his intonation over multiple words. And this style of intonation, slowly going down instead of just at the very end, gives his sentences an extra soft feeling. Okay, and in case there's anyone who still doesn't believe that he has a smooth voice, I mean, you probably knew this already before you clicked on the video, but here's just one more example of this before I move on. If any of you have played Fall Guys before, this is a very mild reaction to some of the garbage that game throws at you. But all Yeosang says after falling off the map is "Ah, 제발," meaning please. And then 뭐야, 이런 게 어딨어, meaning what? That's messed up. And if there's any time that we should hear Yeosang with stronger intonation, it would probably be when a platform suddenly disappears in a game and he loses. But even when Yeosang gets frustrated like this, that is still some of the smoothest intonation that I've ever seen, and he definitely speaks the smoothest of all of the ATEEZ members. Okay, now I've established that Yeosang speaks softly. However, his intonation, tone, and how polite he is still aren't the only reasons why he sounds like that. Because as some of you know, Yeosang also has a lisp. And his lisp makes his speaking on top of everything else sound even softer. But in case you don't know what I'm referring to, here's a clip of Yeosang just saying 안녕하세요, which of course means hello.
안녕하세요.
Whenever he pronounces the consonant 시옷, that's the S letter, that letter sounds extra soft, which makes it almost sound like a TH sound. So instead of 안녕하세요, it almost sounds like 안녕하세요. And here's another clip. Again, pay attention to how he pronounces words with that letter.
저의 아침은 역시 이 상쾌한 햇빛을 받으며 먹을 수 있는 닭가슴살이 아닌 바로 도넛.
And here's just one last short clip. Pay attention to where he says 사랑, meaning love, as well as messenger, meaning messenger, and 소통하면서, meaning while communicating.
저희가 애용하고 저희가 사랑하는 유니버스 프라이빗 메시지로 한번 에이티니와 소통을 하면서 저녁을 한번 추천을 받아보도록 하겠습니다.
Now, Yeosang's pronunciation of this letter isn't a secret, and all of the members are aware that he does this. In fact, the other members occasionally tease him about it too, like in this clip where Yeosang is trying to say a tongue twister that's filled with that letter.
예오상 시작해
자, 괜히 MC를
MC 보여줘
해보겠습니다. 스위스에서 온 스미스 씨는 33세 3시 30분에 3일 숲속에서 숫사슴을 샅샅이 수색해 함께 식사하고 셀수하고 그의 이름을 스위스산 미스터 심슨 씨라 지었네.
시옷 발음 말고는 좀 나쁘지 않았어.
I think his lisp adds to his overall soft speech and his polite tone. So while some people might dislike having a lisp, I think it works in his favor because it matches well with his calm and friendly personality. And since this letter is so common in Korean, it appears in practically every sentence. If you pay attention to this letter when Yeosang is speaking, you're going to hear him do this all the time. And it makes it really easy for me to recognize his voice, and it gives his pronunciation a unique flair. Okay, next I want to talk a bit about Yeosang's handwriting. So let's look at this letter, which all of the members had to write as if it were their final letter before leaving into outer space. And my first impression of his writing is, well, it's not bad, but it's also not that good, because while he writes accurately using the correct stroke order and it's all legible, look at how he writes the first sentence at the top. 내가 많이 아끼는 사람들, meaning to the people I care a lot about. The members all used a calligraphy pen to write these letters, which is a bit difficult to use, but I can tell that he tried moving the pen very slowly when he wrote this, because you can see how each letter here has inconsistent thickness. So if we zoom in and look at that sentence, you can see each letter is a different size. And in a lot of words, the syllables are also unbalanced. Like in this part, 너는 나에게 항상. You can see that the 너는 looks squished. And in the word 항상, the syllable 상 is kind of floating in the air. And then in the next line, 별이었는데, this is all supposed to be written as one word, but he added spaces. And his writing doesn't get that much better toward the bottom. By the last line of this letter, his writing has gotten a little bit smoother. I think he's adjusted to using the pen, but some of the syllables are still oversized, like the very final syllable ya, which is bigger than the syllables before it. Now, I won't analyze this letter much because it was written with a calligraphy pen and those are a bit unwieldy. So let's go on to a more normal letter, a small note that he wrote to 성화. That's the angry bird he drew. So is this letter nicer than the one with the calligraphy pen? Well, let's focus on the content of the letter. He writes 형, 안녕, meaning hey, older brother. And I'll skip down a bit here. 그동안 옆에서 지켜봤지만 형한테 참 배울 게 많아. I've been watching you from the side and there's so much that I can learn from you. 그래서 나도 성장한 것 같아. So I think I've grown too. And this whole letter uses casual speech like this, 많아, 같아, 고마워, etc. It has an overall friendly and warm tone. And he even ends the letter with a little heart. So the handwriting here is pretty much identical to the previous letter. However, there's no longer the issue of struggling to use the calligraphy pen, so individual letters here have more of a uniform thickness. But the other characteristics of his writing that we saw still remain, such as syllables floating a bit higher or lower than others. And if you look at the word 안녕, even, you'll see that the second syllable 녕 is stretched out vertically a bit. And then look at this part, 벌써 우리 함께한, which is supposed to be 3 words, but it's all written together. Okay, I could stop here, but let's just look at one more example, a letter that he wrote to ATEEZ. And I have to say, this looks much nicer. And I mean, that makes sense. He's obviously going to write as nicely as possible in a letter to his fans than he would to just the other members in a quick note. Now, some of his same traits appear here too, but overall he writes accurately, he writes legibly, and I didn't have any problems reading what he wrote. Though I can't say the same for Yoonho, and if you don't know what I mean, go watch my analysis of Yoonho after this one. And Yeosang's writing here actually looks friendly, if that makes sense. He wrote his letters really smooth, especially letters that are normally a bit blocky, like the consonant piup, that's the B letter. He wrote it smoothly in just 2 strokes instead of the normal 4, like in the word 보물 at the top, and that makes this letter look rounded and it's kind of cute. And he also wrote the consonant lir, that's the L letter, like a snake instead of as 3 strokes like in the word 설레네요. And it's a really small detail, but I also like how he wrote the consonant nian, that's the N letter. Normally they're written kind of sharp, like here in the word 너무. And he writes that letter normally when it comes at the start of a syllable, but whenever that letter appears at the bottom of the syllable, I notice that he writes it almost like a bowl. And you can see this at the top in the word 소중한, or the next line, 만난, and especially in the word 즐거운, which has both a snake and a bowl. And as I mentioned, these little quirks help his writing stand out, and I think it looks cute, so I wouldn't really change anything, except I'd maybe recommend practicing spacing, like where he wrote 함께 할 거니까 here as one word when it should be spaced. Okay, now one last quick thing. Let's talk about filler words, and this will be quick because Yeosang doesn't have a favorite filler word. I mean, he uses lots of filler words, everyone does, but he doesn't use any excessively. He uses regular ones occasionally and when they're appropriate to use, like 뭔가 meaning something or like, for example.
댄스 레슨이 없었으면 뭔가 이렇게 브이로그 식으로
Or he uses the word 이제 meaning now or from now.
뭐 이제 윤호나 홍중이 형 이제 아이돌
Or he uses the word 막 meaning like when it's used as a filler word.
확실히 막 피자 뭐 아니면 막 치킨.
Or he also uses the word 이렇게 meaning like this.
이렇게 좀 정자세로 이렇게 앉아서 찍고 싶은데 정자세로 앉으면 이렇게 돼요. 그래서 약간 이렇게 앉아야 합니다.
But Yeosang doesn't use any of these filler words too often, so I wasn't able to notice anything out of the ordinary. So, great job! Okay, and I could keep going on, but there are still 4 more members to analyze, so that's enough about Yeosang for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and also subscribe to my channel for more Korean learning content. Thank you again to my Patreon supporters and channel members, and if you would like to support my channel, there are links to my Patreon page and to become a channel member in the description box. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. 그럼 다음에 또 봐!